This is a Dreamcast disc and is for use only on a Dreamcast unit. Playing this disc on a hi-fi or other audio equipment can cause serious damage to its speakers.
Dreamcast, up to 6 billion players.
Welcome back to the stage of history.
Why don't we play together?
Hey, it's time to make some crazy money. Are you ready? Here we go!
Please stop this disc now.
Hello and welcome to the Dreamcast Junkyard. And you're joining myself, Andrew, along with Lewis. Hi, Lewis.
Hello.
Hello, for another episode of the DreamPod. And today we're joined by a very special guest who, if you're a long-time listener of the DreamPod, you will know very well from some of the early episodes. And he was on the anniversary episode fairly recently as well. And that person is Rob. How are you doing, Rob?
I'm good. Hi, guys. Yeah, it's great to come back on.
Nice to have you. Thank you very much for joining us. Just for people who perhaps are more recent listeners, can you let everybody know a little bit about your history with the Dreamcast Junkyard and what you do?
Yeah, sure, totally. So I started the Dreamcast Junkyard podcast with Tom, the king of the junkyard, way back when. I'm not sure when that was, 2014, 2015. I can't remember right now. Yeah, I was a regular for, I think, 30 to 40 episodes at the start. All those episodes are still on the yard, so I'll keep it short. If you want to hear more of my voice from back then you can dig them out. But yeah, that's my history with the yard. I've written plenty of stuff for the yard as well back in the day, so again, you've got to go back in time a bit, but there's some good content there, so I'll let you do that at your leisure. In terms of who I am, I'm Rob Jones. I'm tech and gaming editor for T3 and T3.com. So I cover lots of sort of tech and gadgets and games and all sorts of good stuff. So yeah, that's about it.
Amazing. Well, it's really nice to have you on again. And yeah, like you said, anybody who wants to hear more of your voice or read more of what you've written, go back to the 2014, 2015. Podcasting was kind of in its infancy in 2014, right? That's when podcasts kind of were beginning. Is that? You helped Tom set it up, right? So was that just you kind of figured that podcasting was the way to go and rolled the dice on it?
Yeah, I can remember. I mean, I'm not going to take all the credit, but I can just remember thinking, Tom had been running the yard with a load of guys like for years before the podcast started, and I'd been a fan, and that's how I got to sort of know of the junkyard essentially. And then I can remember one day Tom put out a call for writers for the yard, and I was just like, this is ideal. I go to this site at least once a week, and I'm mad into my video games, specifically my retro games, and specifically the Dreamcast in very specific areas. So it's like I want to get involved, and that's how I got to know Tom originally. And then we did various events. We did like play expos, all this content. You'll find back on the yard where we sort of took the Dreamcast Junkyard and turned it into into this brand, and we take it round to these expos, and we take all our gear down, and people could play all these old games and stuff. And then I was just like, the one thing that the site didn't have was a podcast. And at the time, video probably wasn't, specifically in this country with its awful sort of internet connections. Yeah. Like video wasn't really a thing that everyone could do very easily. So the idea of doing like a video podcast or anything like that wasn't possible. But an audio podcast, I just thought it'd be really nice for guys who are really passionate about the Dreamcast to, have a chat like we are now.
Yeah. And here we are, some 80-something episodes later with all the extras and stuff that we have. It's amazing. So, yeah, awesome. And yeah, thank you for bringing it here and bringing us all together in a way. You helped to bring the Dreamcast Junkyard family together, which is lovely. So, always nice to have you. Definitely always welcome to come back. So we'll definitely have you back on again another time for sure. It's made me curious about everybody's kind of like almost origin story from the junkyard. Like Lewis, how did you start with the junkyard? I don't think I've heard this story very much.
Yeah, so around 2010, when I was sort of revisiting this console, I remembered playing as a kid and loving. I think I did exactly what most people who love Dreamcast do. They stumbled upon the junkyard through Google searches. I remember the article exactly. It was one where it was basically saying you can play a PS2 controller on the Dreamcast with a specific peripheral. And I don't know how I stumbled upon it, but I was like, oh, this is a cool site. I just remember there was this picture, and someone edited like a speech bubble
from the PS2 controller where it's like ranting about. I think it was something like, first you put your Dreamcast on top of the PS2, and now you're using me on the Dreamcast. Like it was like this angry PS2 controller. I remember it sort of vaguely in the back of my head. I hope I haven't butchered the joke. I remember reading the Junkyard, and I really love the style of writing. I've always loved very sort of dry, deadpan humor. And I always loved articles that Tom had written. I remember reading some from Kev as well. And it's just like the perfect humor. You know, I wanted to write like that. And maybe not so much just specifically about Dreamcast, but about a lot of things. And so I made a website called AltMag, which you can find, altmaguk.net. And to be honest, that's just a place now where I just, you know, if I feel like talking about something, I'll just jot up an article. And I followed the Junkyard because I liked them through AltMag, and Tom then read my articles on there, you know, sort of building this friendship online. And he needed people to write, you know, a few years ago, and he was like, oh, you know, I've been reading your articles for a bit, you know, why don't you join on? And I was like, of course, you know, you're Tom from the Dreamcast Junkyard, absolutely. So yeah. And then I think I got more into it the more I got involved with the DreamPod as well, you know, chatting with everyone. And I've actually been more into collecting Dreamcast because of being involved with this team. So yeah, that's kind of it really. Yeah.
Everybody's made you want to spend your money. Basically, you've spent all your money on Dreamcast games because of this.
I blame Mike and his knowledge and telling me about this game and that game. You know, I blame him mostly. Yes.
I just went to altmag@uk.net, and I have to say I'm enjoying the content that I first see straight off. Every season of Buffy the Vampire Slayer ranked from worst to best.
That's a good article too. I like that one.
Yeah, it's a good one. I'm currently rewatching all the Buffys and Angel sort of like side by side. Sorry, I'm going to go off a really small, quick tangent. You know, like it's one of those things. You know, it's one of those shows. You know, like we all watched when we were younger. But the thing that I sort of twigged this time when I was like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to rewatch all the Buffys and the Angels. What I hadn't remembered was just how tightly those two shows were actually intertwined. Like, do you know what I mean? In terms of when they were actually broadcast, like now, you know, like with the streaming platforms, you've got, you know, they just sort of like splurge all the episodes at once. You know what I mean? Or they'll really, you know, it's like, here, you consume them all immediately, go. And back then, obviously, it's a different model, and they release it, you know, they're showing Buffy and then they're showing Angel and vice versa. And it's not every episode, obviously, but there's times where it's like, you really do need to have watched the Buffy before you watch the Angel. And that's because back in time, that is literally how they were broadcast.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Proper crossover eps that they used to have. It was great. And the fact that they would reference like a character would be missing from a Buffy episode, and they were like, oh yeah, they went to like Los Angeles, wherever Angel was set, and then you go to the next episode of Angel, and there was like, I don't know, Willow or something, because Willow was in one of the episodes, and it was like, oh yeah, there she is. And there would be a whole episode with Willow, and it's like, this is crazy seeing them cross over like that, because it didn't happen a huge amount. Back then.
It didn't happen, did it? I mean, that honestly, I don't want to turn this into the Buffy podcast, but that is literally my sort of revelation. It's just like this sort of world building. Everyone talks about the you know, the MCU and all this, and it's just like how amazing it is and how so pioneering it is to have, you know, they're separate movies, but equally all the movies are linked somehow, and you know, characters from different movies appear in different ones. I'm just like, it's not new, and like Buffy and Angel is a great example of that.
Yeah, Mike is going to be gutted he missed this now, because Mike is an absolutely huge Buffy fan. So next time you're on, if Mike's on the next one, I'll just let you two have at it and chat Buffy for like an hour. We'll just do that instead of talking Dreamcast. But yeah, no, absolutely, Buffy is fantastic, and I kind of want to rewatch it now as well. All right, so I mean, we're doing a bit of a shorter episode today, so and we've already kind of gone into a couple of questions, so I'm not going to do our usual, you know, what have we been playing or anything like that. Let's just jump into the topic that we're going to talk about today. Might be controversial to some, given our stance on it on the Facebook group, I'd say. However, we are going to bring it up here because it is potentially more likely than ever now to actually happen. So Sega, I can't remember the particular chap at Sega who gave the quote, but following the success of their Game Gear Mini, that they've recently done in Japan, they've said that they'd be very interested in trying that with something else. Obviously, they've also done the Mega Drive Mini as well, and that was fairly successful. So they're looking at other consoles that they could potentially do that with, and they have mentioned specifically the potential to have a Dreamcast Mini, which is obviously, it's ignited the fan base somewhat, and there's been a lot of people talking about it. But it's been somewhat of a taboo subject for Dreamcast Junkyard, I guess, along with the Dreamcast 2. Lewis, I don't know if this is something that you have come across very much, being a taboo subject.
I think it's just because it's one of those ones that's been just overdone for years and years. It's like a lot of people I don't think a lot of people see the Dreamcast Mini as being a thing that would happen, because the Dreamcast, unfortunately, was, it was a not, successful for Sega. I think, despite us loving it, unfortunately, it wasn't as popular and brilliant to everyone else as we see it. So I think Sega now, Sega are pretty well known nowadays for being safe with everything. We don't see a new Jet Set radio or anything like that. So it never seemed like a viable thing for them to release a Dreamcast Mini. The Mega Drive Mini, on the other hand, people who don't play video games are like, oh yeah, but the Mega Drive, or in America's case, the Genesis, is a beloved console. And I think really a lot of people remember Sega fondly, but it's mainly for that console, I'd say. Yeah,
I guess so. And it's coming, like, we've had a bunch of mini consoles now. We've had the NES Mini, the SNES Mini, the PlayStation Classic. There was the TurboGrafx Mini that they had. There's obviously the Mega Drive Mini.
I will say, to be fair, the TurboGrafx Mini, it's quite unexpected, really, because one, people don't even know if it came out in the UK. I think it did, but it's very limited, and it wasn't even a success in America. So that was kind of a weird one. So maybe if that could come out in the West, then maybe we could see a Dreamcast Mini.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these mini consoles, that is it. I'm not sure if because we're seeing an increasing breakdown between, like, a lot of them are released in the East. Like there's the Neo Geo. I know they did come over here, but there's the Neo Geo mini portables, and there was even the one that really sort of took my attention was the Sega Astro City Mini. Did you see that?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, and look, obviously, I'm not saying you can't get them here, but yeah, I'm not sure if the Dreamcast Mini does come out, if it's going to make it over here, because I think what Lewis says is kind of right. I think for a lot of people, when you say Sega in this country, they don't think Dreamcast.
Yeah. And yeah, you're right. It's Mega Drive, and it's and there's a huge Saturn fan base out there, of course. But I liked that when Dreamcast was mentioned as a potential mini console, so many people said, "What about the Saturn?
Yeah, what about the Saturn?"
Which I'd love that. But also, if you think that if you think the Dreamcast wasn't particularly popular here, the Saturn was even less popular here, unfortunately. So it's going to be down the line, I reckon, before we see, if the Dreamcast, if we do get a Dreamcast Mini and it does well, potentially then we may get a Saturn. But that's not to say that Japan might not get a Saturn Mini much sooner, because it did so well over there. It was,
exactly.
was a beloved console over there. So what we're saying here basically is that Dreamcast Mini might be a possibility, but potentially it might be a Japan only thing, maybe.
I don't know. I don't think they'd go that far, but just to mention, also they also had said they had one of their other ideas for a potential upcoming mini console is the SG1000 Mini. Mm-hmm. So even more obscure. It's like the thing that came before the Master System.
Okay.
So I don't know who wants that as a mini console.
The Japanese, probably.
Yeah, probably.
But that's what they're doing at the moment, right? Because they've released the Game Gear Mini exclusively in Japan. They're releasing this Astro City arcade cabinet Mini exclusively in Japan. If they did an SG1000, that would definitely be exclusive to Japan. So, I feel like that's the road they're going down here, is that, Sega are just going F everybody else. I was going to swear then, but I won't. F everybody else. Let's just release in Japan, and people can import, I guess, if they want to. But I don't know, because did the other consoles do like the other mini consoles, like the NES, the SNES, the TurboGrafx, the PlayStation Classic? I don't even know if they did very well in the West, did they? I don't think that the PlayStation Classic didn't for sure, but I don't know if anything did well.
That was for different reasons, though, wasn't it? The reason why that did badly.
Wasn't the PlayStation just sort of like people had issues with like emulation and scan lines and whatnot?
It's still a decent console. I have the PlayStation Classic. It's still decent, and it's actually a great emulating machine because you can really easily soft mod it and play whatever games you want on it. So for that reason alone, I thought it would be more successful when people realized that it was, a good modding machine, but it still didn't sell particularly well.
I think the NES and the SNES Mini were successful, but a little bit of it was because of Nintendo's intentional, what's it called? Like they didn't have enough stock of the NES Mini, and so I think half of people who bought an SNES Mini thought, "Oh, this is an investment," and the other half are like, "Yeah, this is cool." And they're well made, so I think obviously once people could get their hands on them, the word got out there. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that interpretation. I mean, I we were trying to push those consoles on T3, and I remember the NES Mini was far more in demand than the SNES, and it was purely down to stock.
Interesting. I mean, to get back to the Dreamcast specifically, then, if they're going to do this, let's just assume that Sega's chosen the Dreamcast as their next mini console, assuming they're going to do any again. What do we think? What's it going to be like? Because it's a lot different from any of the other mini consoles we've seen in the fact that it has. The reason that people love it so much is it was a weird, quirky machine that had internet capabilities and a VMU. Are we going to see those things in a Dreamcast Mini? Will it have online? Will it have VMU support? What do we think?
I'm quite cynical, and I don't think you would get that. I think you would get the PlayStation Classic experience, and I think that would be about it. I mean, is that what I want? Would I want the online? Would I want VMU and all the rest of it? Then, well, yes. I mean, I suppose I would, even though I've obviously got multiple Dreamcasts. So maybe this is always a thing, though, isn't it, with these mini consoles? I do wonder, like, they're not. Are they? I know you've said you've got a mini console, and I've got a mini console. I've got the mini SNES here just because it's convenient. Like I have lots of different region games. I can just bang them in. It's HDMI. It's powered off the just a USB cable. And I've actually got my old-fashioned Famicom and SNES in their box, and they're not coming out. It's just more convenient for me. But I do wonder if a lot of these mini consoles are actually designed for guys like us who are sort of mad into these, into the who actually have the actual consoles and are into the retro games. And as you said, like with the Dreamcast as well, not to put too much of a downer on it, but like I do think it would be more of a PlayStation Classic experience or sort of package that they would deliver. And then I think of the games that they would deliver. And look, there's obviously going to be good games. If there was like 20 games or 30 games or whatever, you could. There's obviously going to be quality in there. But half the reason why I love the Dreamcast was because of the more obscure stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, go on, guys. Yeah.
No, very good point. I do think listening to that and thinking about people modding consoles and because this is a big thing now. There's a huge community, especially in the Dreamcast community. There's a huge kind of sub community that's built up around modding Dreamcasts in order to play any game you want. A lot of my feed on Twitter some days is taken up by people who are modding their Dreamcasts in order to, with the GDEMU or, putting DC HDMI into it, basically to make them more modern consoles and to be able to play all of these weird and wonderful games that you just wouldn't have been able to play before. That's an expensive pastime. And also it's taking away from Sega making money from their properties. So I'm wondering now, could bringing a Dreamcast Mini out, could that be, and like you said, Rob, the fact that it's more convenient for people to have a mini console because, you can just plug it in, you can do what you want with it. It's easy just to, get out. You could put it in a drawer and then get it out and plug it in because it's just so easy to connect. Yeah. Would Sega be, if they do release a Dreamcast Mini, is this their way to get back what's become an increasingly big market with the Dreamcast? The Dreamcast is taken off again to a degree. Would they be trying to capitalize on that by making people buy this console that which will essentially, hopefully emulate Dreamcast incredibly well? Do you think that's what they might do here? Try and take back the market from the modders?
Nintendo has that in the bag, really, because I think that they've perfected the model of selling games you've already bought back to you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And I imagine Sega, they've done it a million times with the Mega Drive. Maybe they want a sort of more slices of that pie, in this case with the Dreamcast.
Yeah, I definitely think that is part of it. And I also think that, it's almost, if they get the sort of the demand right, it's almost like a win-win situation, because do I think that them turning out a Dreamcast Mini is gonna, fill Sega's coffers like Scrooge McDuck's money bank? No, but I do think it's like, one, it will get some, sort of wrestle a bit more of that money back, but it's also just great in terms of brand building, and because let's be fair, like we all have experienced it, like after the Dreamcast, Sega's name for years, it was just like, it's almost like it was like you shouldn't mention it, don't mention it, like, or we don't talk about that, it's almost like Lord Voldemort. You're not supposed to say, it's like, oh, that was terrible what happened there, and it's just like the ghost of, the Sega ghost is sort of looming in the background. It's just like, what's modern gaming become, and all this sort of stuff. But look at Sega now, like I would argue, like the name has definitely had, it's got, well, financially it has. Like it has definitely recovered financially. Not to obviously old Sega levels, nowhere near, but it's not like this, like, this almost shell of a company, like this non-entity anymore. And so just bringing out a Dreamcast Mini, I just think would be a sort of a win-win situation from a brand point of view.
Yeah. They're quite heavy on the sort of retro stuff at the moment. Like they've got Sega Forever, and it's like a whole Twitter account that just tweets out, do you remember this? This came out this many years ago. So, they do seem to be a little bit, at least trying, maybe from a bit more of a skin deep point of view. Yeah. It seems like they're trying to sort of respect the fact that people remember them for more than just, Sonic on the Mega Drive. There's other stuff that, people love about Sega that's, not just the Mega Drive, in this case, the Dreamcast. Yeah.
I would agree with you, but I think what you said about it being skin deep is absolutely like hitting the nail on the head there, because what I would counter with all this sort of skin deep sort of like remember this and remember how good we are, sort of this engagement and just sort of brand building is Bomb Rush Cyberpunk. People have been asking, much to his disgruntlement a lot of the time, Hideki Naganuma for years. They're just like, where's the next, Jet Set Radio? Where's the next Jet Set Radio? And like he's just like, I'm not Sega, guys. Like, give me a break. And like people want these things, like, oh my god, like they want a new game, but Sega isn't making it. Sega's not making that. That's why Bomb Rush Cyberpunk exists, and that's why I'll give money to the developer of that, Team Reptile, and not Sega. So I think someone mentioned it earlier. I'm not sure, I can't remember who, but it's like how they're sort of quite conservative in their moves at the minute, and that's why I almost think that a Dreamcast Mini will come out, because I think it is a quite safe play for them, because I don't think they can really lose with it. But I don't think that is like that is going to, one, make them a dump truck load of money, and two, usher in this like amazing new era where we're going to see Sega, like properly making games again.
And it sounds like also you think that if they were to release it, it would be bare bones. So they just sort of do it for maybe cash in a little bit, but not go too far. I think we're like the Mini NES. Nintendo could definitely make it as charming as, if you ever played the Mini NES, like the menus, everything is so charming and well done. I don't know if they could go that far with it, really.
All right, so we are, we've discussed maybe what Sega's thinking might be behind bringing out a mini console. They've done it before. Hopefully they'll do it again. And, we can't tell what it's actually going to be like. What is our ideal scenario for a Dreamcast Mini? What do we really want to see? What is a must-have in terms of hardware to start off with? What do we want to see in terms of hardware for the Dreamcast Mini? What has to come over from the original console for you to be interested?
As long as the games run fine, it's pretty much a win for me. They could even put in a bit of of menu that looks like the old, Dreamcast like home page screen, with a sort of floating icons with like the water or whatever it is behind it. They could do a bit of that. Really, if I was going to be ridiculous, you could have a controller that had kind of like a little sort of Tamagotchi style window molded into it that would show up the VMU stuff. But I don't, they would never go as far as releasing VMUs for it. I mean, that kind of makes me wonder as well. It's kind of a weird concept for it, like you mentioned the VMU, because it's like in Sonic Adventure that there's the station where you put the chows on a VMU. So what would they do then if it's empty? Because of course it's going to have Sonic Adventure on it. What would happen with that? Like, would it just kind of say, sorry, no VMU plugged in? Probably. I don't know. That's kind of a weird thing, really.
So you'd want the VMU, but you just don't think that they would have the capability to do it, I guess.
I don't know if it'd be worth their time, personally.
I mean, feel free after this to go as wild as you want, but I have a wild idea of what I want the Dreamcast Mini to be.
Go on,
and bear with me with this. So no console so far, no mini console so far has done anything like this, but it's all stuff that people have kind of wanted and gone, why haven't they done this? This would be great. And it's obviously because money, and it costs money to do these things. So my thought is have lovely Dreamcast Mini, looks like a Dreamcast. Obviously has to have the blue swirl in Europe and stuff, because that's what we want. I don't want no orange swirl. And then have full size controllers. I would argue that you have a small screen built into it and Rumble built into it already without having to put anything into it, but not necessarily have games. Maybe just like if it had Resident Evil Code Veronica, the little screen would show the second screen stuff that game would have. What I would then suggest is that because online was such a big deal for the Dreamcast, that it is an online console, that it has Wi-Fi, that is able to connect to the internet. So you have some games that you're able to actually play online to a limited degree. I mean, we'll talk about games in a minute, but stuff like Phantasy Star Online perhaps being an example. And to go a couple of steps further, I would have inbuilt storage, and Sega could put a store on there. If they've got online already, you could buy extra games. You could supplement it with more Dreamcast games as you go down, if you wanted to. And also, the last thing I would say is we were talking about VMU earlier, and the fact you had like the Chow games with Sonic Adventure, and you've got like the Power Stone games that you'd have, all the little mini games you could play on the VMU. I would say if you got those, that there'd be some kind of Bluetooth transfer with your phone, and they'd bring out an app where you could play those games on your phone.
Cool, yeah.
I think that would be amazing to have something like that.
Or even there's actually, I think you can get this. There'll be a Dreamcast Junkyard article about it. Just search on there. There was an actual disc that you could burn and put in your Dreamcast. I'm pretty sure it was a VMU emulator that you could play on your Dreamcast. So you could even have something, if they weren't to do a phone app, they could have, the emulator on the console maybe. So you could maybe like leave Sonic Adventure and, go there.
Yeah, that makes sense as well.
That's like an amazing idea, Andrew. And you know what?
That will never happen. Yeah.
I wish Sega thought a bit more like you. I really do.
If they want to hire me, I'm free and available to be hired. No. I mean, every mini console people have said, but what about, what do if I want to download extra games? And, people have done that, in ways that they shouldn't do, the non-legal way. But I think people are missing a trick with these mini consoles, because if Sega offered more games to download, I'd snap their hand off. If I had the ability because it's such a, especially if it's HDMI, that, it'll upscale them to at least HDMI. I wouldn't say 4K, because I don't think those games would look great in 4K, but at least, HD resolution. The people have been doing this with the Dreamcast for the last 5-10 years. That's why DC HDMI exists, because people really want to play it on their modern TVs. So if Sega went ahead and said, hey, you know what, we'll do it for you, here's an official version that will plug into your HD TV, you can download more games for if you want to, I think that would sell like hotcakes, I think, but it's the price.
That phrase you said, missing a trick, I actually think Sega are missing a trick, not having even something like what you've mentioned on, say, the Mega Drive Mini, because obviously Nintendo, because I just thought for a second, I was like, well, why didn't the NES or the SNES? Because Nintendo loves selling games back to us. So I was thinking, why wasn't it on the NES or the SNES? But it's like, well, they have the eStore on a Switch, whereas Sega don't have that. So it could be, good for them to operate something like that. Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
All right. So, I mean, do we have any other, now that I've kind of given you my amazing vision for the Dreamcast Mini that will never happen, is there anything else that we can think of that we would add to it that would be good in terms of quality of life or things we've always wanted for the Dreamcast, or do we want to move on to games?
I think the other thing I would say is, like, I mean, a lot of Dreamcast games ran really well originally. Like, it's one of the reasons why I actually like the console so much. Like, it was not a console where a lot of the titles seemed overstretched in terms of what they tried to do. But yeah, I just want the new system not to sort of like faithfully replicate it in frame rate and everything. Like, the smoother it can be, and as you just mentioned, like with that ultimate release, like the higher resolution, the better the frame rate. Sign me up, basically.
Yeah, especially with something like Sega Rally 2. That would be nice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly.
All right. So, yeah, talking about games, these mini consoles, you can only fit so many on. And, there's licensing issues and all sorts of things you have to consider. That's unfortunately why things like Crazy Taxi, when they've been ported elsewhere, have lost their iconic music and branding. But what would we want to see? If licensing wasn't an issue, if we didn't have to worry about any of this, which Dreamcast games would be for you the ones that have to be on there?
I'm going to go with Ready to Rumble Boxing.
Interesting.
Or Ready to Rumble Boxing 2. Not like the most like super obvious choices, but I'm picking that purely because I had like that. For me, it's like in my at least top 5 in terms of just out and out fun. Really like those games. Thought they had loads of character, and either one's fine. They're both actually very similar.
Okay. It's interesting not going for like one of the more obvious games up front.
This is it, my friend. Like, there's lots of obvious choices.
There are, yeah. It's true.
I'll go with go on. Lewis.
No, you go.
I'll throw another one that's maybe a bit more obvious. Res. Absolutely, for me, 100%. Like, that is just right on the list. No questions, has to be on there. For me, it's one of those games where I think of Dreamcast, I think of Res, and vice versa. I know that it's not just exclusively Dreamcast, but I know for me, it's one of those games that I've tied in my mind at least to that console.
Awesome, Lewis.
Obviously, you got to have all the party games, which makes me wonder. Surely you need to package it with more than one controller. This is a console that. I love for that. So I mean, maybe they could just sell me another controller and I'd buy, 3 of them. But anyway, obviously, all the multiplayer, Power Stone. I mean, I want to say something like Quake 3 Arena is great fun as well, but I don't know if that would be one that'd be obvious for them to put on there. One that is a weird one, but if we're thinking about the Dreamcast being more successful in Japan, and this because it is going to be aimed at them as well, Sakura Wars is a series that Mike's explained to me that it's kind of like ridiculous how popular this series was in Japan, and that would be one that would like absolutely be included. I would really hope they wouldn't go the way of the TurboGrafx Mini. One of the issues with that is it has like really great games on it, like Snatcher, for example, but it's just in Japanese. So you can buy the European version, and there's just a game that you can't play if you can't speak Japanese. Exactly. I mean, obviously there's games on there that are Japanese releases that have Japanese, but you can still play them. But something like Snatcher is just, you can't unless you know the language. And Sakura Wars is similar because it's like an RPG, tactical RPG visual novel. But that is one that would have to be on there for definite. And I'd love for them to see them actually translate it. That would be really nice. But I wouldn't, I wouldn't. I'd hold my breath. Yeah.
Well, in our little fantasy world here, let's they can translate it. It's fine. I mean, then that would be a great thing for them to do because, as we may discuss in a future episode, there are a lot of games that did not come out in the West that are fantastic, and if they could translate some of those, and bring them to Dreamcast Mini, that'd be great. And there's been so many like fan projects to try and translate some of the bigger ones, like Sega Gaga. People trying to translate it into English so that people, if Sega took the time and went, hey, there's all these games here that people have been going mad about for years and have had all these projects and stuff, let's just do it for them, because they have the power to do that, right? Why not do that? Especially if they're selling extra games on an online store, they could charge what they wanted for them then. And similarly with, you mentioned the controllers there, if they're USB, which I'd imagine they would be, like many of the controllers for these mini consoles are now, you could buy extra and use those on different consoles, which would be another way for them to sell more stuff. So really, this is just a gold mine for Sega. If they do it right, it's a gold mine for them in many ways. And, not that they're going to do it the way that we think they're going to do it. I fear that, Rob, your prediction of it being very much a PlayStation Classic affair with 30 games and nothing else and a very basic control will probably be what we get. But yeah, I
mean, this is it. Sorry. Anyway, before I speak more, what about your choices?
Well, I mean, I generally, mine would be fairly obvious. I'd love both the Shenmue games on there, with both voice tracks for both games.
Oh, definitely.
Great.
Yeah.
I'd love Power Stone. Like Lewis, I have a big love for Power Stone. I love that game. Resident Evil Code Veronica, because it's synonymous with the Dreamcast. Like Res is synonymous for you with the Dreamcast. Code Veronica, although it's been on many other consoles, it's synonymous with the Dreamcast for me. It's the reason I bought the Dreamcast. And then just the more obvious ones like Crazy Taxi, Sonic Adventure,
Jet Set Radio,
Space Channel 5. The big ones that people remember the Dreamcast for.
Soul Calibur.
Soul Calibur. Exactly.
You couldn't. I don't think you could release it without. If there was no Soul Calibur, even though there's someone who kind of, I like Soul Calibur, but when I think Dreamcast, I don't think of Soul Calibur. But for many people, especially people who had it at launch, like Soul Calibur is like the Dreamcast game, that everyone played. So yeah.
Absolutely.
I actually thought of one other thing.
Go on.
Okay.
There'd be one problem, and there's one specific game that is like Dreamcast has to be on there.
Okay.
House of the Dead 2. How would that work?
Yeah, true.
Because like
Typing of the Dead, they could release a little mini keyboard.
Yeah.
That'd be amazing. Yeah. But either game both require a peripheral, and no light gun game is fun with the controller, and like anyone who just did it with a controller was like, because they didn't have the light gun, or it didn't work with their TV. It's like it's the saddest thing ever if you have to resort to using the controller for something like House of the Dead 2. So I don't know how that would work. It'd be a bit of an odd one, that.
I remember, I honestly, I don't do all this all the time. I'm not always plugging my book, but in Dreamcast Year 1, Matt Gardner, who was my editor, he wrote the retrospective for House of the Dead 2, and he did just that. He had House of the Dead 2 and no gun, and he hated that game. Because he didn't play it the proper way. I think he later played it with a gun and he understood why it was great, but when he first got it, it was like playing with a controller. And
I'm terrible at games like that anyway, with the gun. So it's much worse without it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Last thing I'll say on it. I think kind of what we've touching on, like the different territories as well. Like I think that's maybe at least one thing that these mini consoles have sort of on the whole got right, is that obviously different territories had different tastes, and as we've discussed, like with the Saturn and the Dreamcast, definitely different levels of success and tastes on those consoles, just in Japan, say North America and in Europe. And you've seen that replicated where you tend to have like a core of games that don't change between the different releases in the different regions, and then round the edge, I don't know the amount, maybe 5 games, 6 games, something like that, and then they sort of swap them in, depending on what worked or what's more favorable in those territories. Like I was thinking, if it was a Dreamcast Mini and it was released in Japan, I'd expect you've got to get some shmups in there, right? You've got to get, I don't know, Mars Matrix, or you've got to get Ikaruga and like these these sort of incredibly high quality shmups. But let's be fair, like I know there's a lot of people in the West, including myself, like I'm a massive Saturn shmups guy, and I've got a large collection of them. I've got some good shmups on Dreamcast and various other systems as well. But that genre never reached the sort of the popularity heights here that it did in Japan. And while those games are amazing, I don't know if I could, if I was thinking of like releasing the Dreamcast Mini now, and like Ikaruga's absolutely quality, same with Mars Matrix to a degree, and it's like, would I put them on a like a quote unquote PAL system to release here? And I'm just like, maybe not. I think it's not only the taste of the games, but also like the type of games that they are as well. Like I'm thinking, it's maybe subconsciously, it's why I chose Ready to Rumble Boxing. Like I see these mini consoles as aimed more at casual gamers, or more at like maybe gamers like us who you might, in the old school, you might say they were hardcore or whatever, or serious collectors, but their usage will still be casual. Like I don't think, I mean, again, other people may disagree with me, I don't think I would be looking to sit down on a miniature console and play a 90-hour RPG. Like I see a lot of these consoles, for me personally, again, I'm saying other people have different tastes, I see them as very much pick 'em and play. I'm going to have a bit of multiplayer action now. I'm going to have, I'm going to spend 20 minutes. I'm going to steal it in here. I'm going to stick it in my backpack. I'm going around to my friend's house. Maybe as part of the entertainment tonight, we're going to play a bit. Do you know what I mean? But it's not going to be it's not going to be like, right, it's RPG Sunday, guys, and I'm down for 6 hours.
But if it was more fully fledged, like kind of how Andrew dreamed of it, proper controller, maybe you could even have the chance to buy, other games. Would you be more inclined to pick one up? If it wasn't just a PlayStation 1 crap job,
Absolutely, my friend. Like the idea of like getting stuck back in some like Phantasy Star Online, like a big multiplayer game like that, or any sort of like RPG that has some, specifically if it had any sort of online community, ticks a load of boxes for me, definitely. I mean, like I don't know if I'd have the, I'm being brutally honest, I don't know if I'd have the time to sit down and do it, but purely on paper, absolutely, yeah. If it was more like that Dream system, 100%. I just keep falling back on, I think again, it's that split between like our dream and what's going to be in the reality. And I think if it was the dream, then I'd have more of these obscure titles. I'd definitely be game for like, online multiplayer, for longer gaming experiences. But I think, again, sort of the flip side of that coin is I think in the real world, it's going to be a console with limitations. And as such, I think you'd probably want it to be stocked, or I personally, again, would want it stocked with a certain type of game, and that's versus fighters, like, but it, you get it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one.
It is. I think they were definitely for me and for my taste, and I think to be fair, for everybody, the one game they could forget Shenmue if they really wanted to. You can get that game on every console and platform you want now. If they could release any long experience on a Dreamcast Mini, it would have to be Skies of Arcadia, because that game is not playable outside of the Dreamcast and the GameCube.
It's like the Sega sin bin, isn't it? Just rotting away. Yeah,
which is a shame, because it's such a great game and it gets mentioned so often, and it's I don't understand why they haven't released it in some form, or even as a downloadable game on modern consoles. It just doesn't make sense. And one other thing that I would say as well is how for the SNES Mini they decided to release a game that never got released before. They did Star Fox 2. Yeah. Which is a reason I at some point really want to get one, just because I can play that game. If they could release a game that never actually got finished for the Dreamcast, we'll kind of end with this kind of question: what game would you want them to bring out on the Dreamcast Mini?
Maybe I don't know though, because I could play it on another console. I was always gutted that the Half-Life port never made it. So I'm going to go with that.
Okay, Lewis.
If we're doing the Dreamcast Mini, like your version, and you can do online multiplayer, then it's got to be a Propeller Arena. I've never actually played it. I've never got the chance to play it, but from what I've seen, it just looks like another fun multiplayer experience that, I'd love to play with some people sometime, but I've just never got around to playing it. But probably if it had been released, I would own it now and I would have played it already. But I think because it was never released, I never gave it the chance. But yeah, that is my choice.
Nice. Yeah, I was at mine for sure, just because I'd like to see Sega kind of elbowing Nintendo a bit and going, hey, we can do that. They obviously had Geist Force, which never got released, was very close to completion, which is Sega's version of Star Fox pretty much.
Yeah.
So if they released that on the Dreamcast Mini, Star Fox 2 on the SNES Mini, Geist Force on the Dreamcast Mini, I think that would be pretty. I don't know what the word is for that, but that would be pretty cool if they could do that. Interesting to play that. All right, well that's interesting. I maybe we should, if they announce a Dreamcast Mini, if it happens, we should reconvene and probably commiserate with each other as to how terrible the game selection is and the awful features that it has.
I don't know. If they got like the obvious games, Shenmue, Soul Calibur, Sonic Adventure, like it can't be that bad, really.
This is where it's like, guys, we're going to announce the games day after day, and like the first day it's like Spirit of Speed 1937. Woo!
James would love that.
We've seen you guys talking about this a lot on the internet. You must really want it.
We just went by the most searched things on Google, and Spirit of Speed was right up there. Yeah. But okay, well, that was a great chat. Thank you very much, guys. It's nice to chat about that kind of thing. And obviously, anybody listening, I know that we don't often talk about mini consoles or anything, but just for this one occasion, if you listen to this and want to kind of talk to us about it on Twitter, throw us a tweet and we'll chat consoles. Let us know what your ideal games would be for a Dreamcast Mini if it was ever going to happen. And of course, please follow us. It's at the DC Junkyard on Twitter, and do take a look at the website, which is the dreamcastjunkyard.co.uk, for all of our brilliant articles, including some by Lewis and some by Rob, of course, and one by me because I've only written one, just the one. But yeah, thank you very much, Lewis. Where can people find you on the internet if they so wish?
You can find me at LewisJFC, spelled LEWIS. And I do think it's me and Mike who operate the Dreamcast Junkyard Twitter account. So you'll probably hear me causing some trouble on there. Yeah.
You do a damn good job of it as well. It's awesome, both of you. Thank you. Rob, where can people find you on the internet? If you want them to find you, of course.
Yeah, sure. No, that's great. Yeah, I always love having a convo. I'm on Twitter. That's sort of like the place to get me. And that's my tag is at rnicholasj. So that's RNICHOLASJ at rnicholasj on Twitter. And you can also contact me at t3.com.
Awesome. Excellent. You can find me at Oddment84 on Twitter, and of course we do Dreamcast Years as well, which is at Dreamcast Years. If you want to listen to my other podcast, feel free. I'm just going to plug it because I can, because I'm hosting. Lewis can probably cut it out later if he wants to, because he has the power. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us for another episode, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye bye.
Please stop this disc now.